Buffy the Vampire Slayer is one of the more famous examples of television shows that follow the Monster of the Week format. While there is an overarching story going on from season to season, occasionally the show will completely strip back and let an unknown villain take over for an episode. While that sounds like filler to a lot of new TV audiences, these episodes actually allowed for some of the more memorable moments of the show. It gives opportunities to understand these characters more, and while some of the examples on this list are episodes which are also plot heavy, some are simply silly little episodes which remain memorable because of the sum of its parts, rather than what's going on around it. Now, to make things clear, I'm not ranking the monsters in the episodes themselves, I'm ranking the episodes here. If there's a monster in the episode that isn't the main villain of the respective season and is defeated in that episode, it counts. And this is a warning, there will be spoilers. This is a countdown of the top 10 Monster of the Week episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
And I'm here to tell you, it is not a game. It does count, and I don't stand for that kind of malarkey in my house.
I guess it's a good thing I'm not in your house.
Following the two-part story What's My Line, which spanned the previous 2 weeks, the writers decided to take it easy for the mid-season finale and bring us Ted. Buffy's mum falls for a man named Ted, who later turns out to be psychotic, and then later turns out to be a robot. This episode has some of the biggest twists for a single episode story up to this point, with Buffy having to butt heads with the police for the first time, and that detective who, I'm not kidding, has to interview Buffy like 3 separate times in the show, and he never catches on that something may be wrong here. John Ritter is the guest star, playing the eerie Ted, built to be the best husband and father he can be. He's what makes the episode, going back and forth between sitcom family dad to murderous misogynistic robot. The initial idea in which Buffy has killed a human being, no matter how awful he is, was a great thing to explore for the character, and while it would ultimately prove to not be the case when Robot Ted is revealed, it would later be explored further in season 3 with Faith.
This is the part that's less fun. When there isn't any screaming.
What's up with you two in the leather?
Hailed by fans as one of the greatest episodes of the show, The Wish explores an alternate universe in which Buffy never came to Sunnydale. This means that the plans of the Master, which she foiled in the first season, went ahead as planned, and he now has control over Sunnydale. The Monster of the Week, however, is Anyanka, the Vengeance Demon who grants Cordelia's wish, transports her into said alternate universe. We see Xander and Willow as vampires, Giles back to his shy and timid ways of season 1, and Buffy is this trained military slayer, not too discernible from the Initiative, which would be introduced in the following season. While it wasn't the first sci-fi show to explore the idea of a character being transported to an alternate universe, because Doctor Who did it in 1970, but it stands out as a great character study. You can compare the characters in the show to this alternate universe where none of that happened, showing another side to these very same characters. For example, Giles is the one to save the day, using his books to figure out how to take down Anyanka, reverting her to human form, later becoming a main character and love interest to Xander. Okay, while technically she appears in more than one episode, this is the only one where she is portrayed as a villain. Later appearances have her known simply as Anya, and while she later becomes a Vengeance Demon again, she's portrayed as a flawed character that we've come to love, and she sticks with the gang until the very end. It's also because of this technicality that I didn't place this episode higher on the list. If you want to get technical, you can debate this one all day.
I love a gifty. Can't wait to unwrap it.
Season 7 is a pretty weak season for the show, and while I like it, it does have a lot of issues. This episode, however, is not one of those issues. It combines every single aspect of what makes the show great and produces a solid, scary and funny genre bender which defines Buffy. Gnarl is the monster, paralysing his victims while he eats them alive, and I've said this previously, but in terms of scariness, he takes the cake. The whole episode revolves around Willow coming back from England after her rehabilitation from... yeah, that whole thing. She finds herself alone, the gang nowhere to be found, but the thing is, the gang are there and exist at the same time as her. They just can't see or hear each other. This results in some great scenes, including a memorable encounter with Spike who can't work out why they aren't acknowledging each other.
Everyone's talking to me. No one's talking to each other.
Might as well go.
Willow almost gets eaten alive by Gnarl, but the gang figure out that it's Willow who is preventing them from seeing each other due to her anxiety about being accepted back by the gang after. Yeah, that whole thing. However, like a lot of Season 7, it sorely missed Giles, who doesn't appear at all, only heard in phone calls. This is one of my favourite episodes of the show. It's just so fun and thrilling, with hair-raising scares and timeless laughs throughout.
Who has the least fear? And it has nothing to do with who has the big, sharp... Come on.
The Xander episode is a tradition amongst Buffy seasons. Xander is not a well-liked character within the fandom these days for very justifiable reasons. However, I see a lot of development and maturity throughout the show, growing from a bit of a dork into the heart of the gang by season 7. No one point solidifies this development more than the Zeppo, the Xander episode of season 3. The entire gang handles an apocalypse, shoving Xander to the sidelines as he's the only human of the gang without any magical abilities or knowledge. In an American Graffiti sort of way, he gets led on an adventure by this insane bully named Jack, who's actually a zombie, to resurrect all his other dead buddies to blow up the school. We see glimpses of the dramatic battle the gang are leading, but just like they did with Xander, they are sidelined. It's all about Xander wandering around to try and get help, escape from killer apocalypse monsters, or even lose his virginity with the gang in the background. It all culminates in a great scene where Xander convinces Jack to disarm the bomb, not afraid of death.
It's little bits being swept up by a janitor dead, and I don't think you're ready for that. Are you? I like the quiet.
It ultimately makes Xander come off as cool, something which the show hadn't convinced you of before, and while the writers never fully dive into this side of Xander again, only making passing mentions, it does have a massive impact on my perception of him. Jack and the zombie guys are decent villains, but that's not why this episode is on the list. It's the almost sitcom-like way it's written, like the Kramer side plot in an episode of Seinfeld which somehow connects with the main plot. And that's Xander, he's the wisecracker, comic relief character. It works so well, and most of the other Xander episodes try to emulate this to varying degrees of success following season 3.
Oh my god.
Written by what I like to call a one-episode wonder, which is when a writer only writes one episode for a show, this one is helmed by Diego Gutierrez, the assistant for creator Joss Whedon throughout the run of the show. This is his bash at an episode, and it doesn't disappoint. The whole premise is that Buffy has imagined the entire show in her head, and she's actually in a mental institution suffering from schizophrenia. Now this sounds like one of those fan theories you hear on the internet, but it's real. Or it's not really. There is a plot reason for Buffy's hallucinations of another world, but the show plays this as if she wanted to find a way out of her delusions in the other world. She attempts to kill the rest of the gang, beckoned on by her dead mother, who is still very much alive in this fantasy world. And that's why I put this one on here. The monster of the week could be seen as the demon that infected Buffy, however technically that was summoned by the trio. No, I make my case for Buffy and her own mind as being the monster of the week for this episode. She tries to kill her friends and family, wanting to desperately cling on to this other life. It was a very interesting choice to end the episode in the other world, almost implying that the whole show really is in Buffy's head, a choice which every other Buffy writer disowned at the time, stating it wasn't true. Perhaps coming from the inexperience of a new writer, but all the same, a great episode.
Told him he'd never use it.
Season 3 is definitely the most prolific season of the show in terms of great episodes. For instance, this isn't the first episode from Season 3 to appear on the list, and it's not the last either. The first episode written by Jane Espenson, who would write for the show from this point until the final season. This episode follows the adults of Sunnydale having their minds reverted back to that of teenagers thanks to chocolate supplied by Ethan Rayne. Now this is the point where a lot of you might be thinking, Ethan Rayne? Well, he appeared in more than one episode. In fact, he appears in 4 episodes in total. So how can he be a monster of the week if he's there for multiple weeks? Well, that's a very good point, and the only reason for this episode being here and why I've classified Ethan Rayne as a monster of the week is that he's never the main villain of a season, and he only makes one appearance in all of season 3, which is Band Candy. He does make 2 appearances in season 2, but this appearance is purely played as a monster of the week. He gets defeated at the end of the episode, and we don't see him again until halfway through season 4. While the mayor does appear, as well as Mr. Trick, the idea is all Ethan's. The whole treat of this episode is seeing the adult characters in the show acting like teenagers. Giles and Joyce being a dollar store version of Rebel Without a Cause, while Snyder acts like a wimpy nerd, butting into everyone's business. It's such a fun episode, and I always get a kick out of it.
Well, gotta say, not loving the new you.
Well, wait. Get off me!
And we move into another Season 3 episode now with Doppelgangland, a Whedon-penned classic of the show, following the vampire Willow from The Wish, talked about earlier in the video, who gets transported to the canon universe, similar to Cordelia in the Wish episode itself. She causes havoc and confuses every character in the show, resulting in some of the funniest lines of the season.
Something very strange is happening.
Can you believe the Watchers Council let this guy go? Willow's dead. Hey, Willow.
The attempt to green screen the two Willows together was ambitious for the time, I'll give it that, but I always feel like the shots where they have a stand-in pretending to be the other Willow off screen work better, because of course there's just going to be two Alison Hannigans. She doesn't have an identical twin. Unlike Nicholas Brendon, when this idea was revisited for a later episode in season 5, Nicholas Brendon's identical brother played the other Xander, and it was pretty convincing. The writing is better here though, with an absolutely iconic standoff in the bronze between the real Willow pretending to be the evil Willow while trying to convince Anya that she's the evil Willow. Oh, it's just brilliant. Say what you will about Whedon, but he knew these characters and he can play on cliche tropes so well and create his own spin on it. I've always stated that this is my favourite episode of the show. Everything about it is interesting, the possession aspect leading to murder being unknowingly committed by the possessed. Then there's the moral aspect of the original story behind the spirit, being a student who fell in love with his teacher, and when she rejects him after already taking part in a relationship, he lashes out and kills her, followed shortly by himself. The way this weaves in with the overarching story of having Angelus and Buffy act out the possession again, only for things to end differently due to Angelus being a vampire, not only saving the day, but being a poignant commentary on the relationship between these two characters prior to Angel losing his soul, is so masterfully done. Every character has great lines in this episode.
Hey, if Sunnydale High School shuts down forever, do we automatically graduate?
But why?
The scene where the spirit tries to deter the gang from doing a spell on him. The scene where Giles thinks the spirit is Jenny, his girlfriend who was killed 2 episodes ago.
Well, I encourage you to always challenge me when you feel it's appropriate. You should never be cowed by authority. Except, of course, in this instance, when I'm clearly right and you were clearly wrong.
There's just so much to unpack here in a short 45-minute time span. One of season 2's strongest, and that's even amongst the non-Monster of the Week episodes, which just goes to show how strong the show is writing and character-wise. Originally written by Whedon as a response to a review of the show that stated it would be nothing without its dialogue, the so-called silent episode was made, in which the characters all have their voices stolen by the gentlemen who want to steal 7 hearts from the people of Sunnydale without getting caught, hence the voice taking. This allows the characters to express themselves in physical form using hand signals and facial expressions to convey the characters' emotions, which to me is fascinating. Season 4 is one of Buffy's weakest, but when people think of the best episodes of Buffy, this one always pops up near the top. The sheer amount of potential this gave Whedon to develop the storylines and make jokes unlike anything ever seen before on American television is amazing. The gentlemen are creepy villains and work extremely well to up that horror factor too. This episode just has everything, and if it weren't for another episode just edging it out, it would top the list.
Last night, did anybody, burst into song?
Merciful Zeus.
While it's not directly responsible for the musical episode trope which dozens of shows would follow in the years to come, it's one of the shows which made it popular. This episode surrounds the main story arcs of the first part of season 6, and furthers it while playing around the musical trope. For example, Buffy is dealing with the fact that she's been resurrected from the dead and ripped from heaven by her friends, which she reveals to them in song, forced by a dancing demon named Sweet, who forces the whole town to sing and dance until they explode. Giles realises he has to leave Buffy behind to grow without him, in song. Xander and Anya realise that they don't really have a lot in common and the relationship won't work out in the long run, in song. Spike tries to cope with being in love with Buffy, who detests him, in song, and this culminates in the two eventually kissing at the end of the episode. There are so many little moments to this, including the mustard song and the parking song, which are background characters given the spotlight for brief moments. Unlike a lot of other musical episodes you may have seen, this one has the characters aware that they're in a musical, as it's a part of the plot. I love it, and it allows the reveal of certain story elements like Buffy being stripped from heaven and Buffy's lust for Spike to be portrayed in a way that the audience just never saw coming. It's television history, and the soundtrack still finds its way into my rotation even when I'm not thinking or writing about the show at all. Whedon didn't just write the episode, he wrote all the music too, which allows the music to encapsulate the character in that moment. Under Your Spell is Tara's ballad for Willow, which is also used as a double entendre for the fact that in the previous episode Willow used a spell on Tara to forget a fight that they'd had over Willow's magic usage, which Tara figures out and becomes another story arc over the following episodes. Rest in Peace is Spike's confession of devotion and love for Buffy while disguising it as wanting to be left alone because he knows she'll never love him back, but he still tries nonetheless, which works and leads to their kiss because Buffy connects to the dead guy more than her actual friends. It's such a bright spot within a very dark season, which a lot of people are mixed on. For me, Sweet is a great monster of the week, and his own musical number with Dawn is brilliant still, and stands up with the other tracks in its own right. It's episodes like the 10 I've discussed that really describe how much this show has had an impact on me, and on television as a whole. With a revolutionary show like this, little episodes like Monsters of the Week make a big difference. Like I said earlier, filler is the big word thrown around nowadays, but the reality is, most people miss these kinds of episodes. Gone are the 22 episode seasons now, and we're left with 10, sometimes as little as 8 episode seasons, to give us time to get to know, understand and connect with that show's characters and storylines. Buffy masterfully does this, unlike any other show you've seen before, and any show you'll see after.